This narrative follows Julian, who for over a decade had been the designated scapegoat during his family's extravagant annual summer solstice gala at a premium coastal vineyard. No matter how much effort he poured into organizing the event behind the scenes, his hypercritical relatives always managed to find a bizarre reason to claim he had somehow tarnished their perfect evening. The bitter memories of past celebrations lingered vividly in his mind, especially the previous year, when his older sister loudly accused him of ruining the entire ambient simply because a single floral arrangement was slightly out of place. His mother had quickly joined the chorus of disapproval, sighing dramatically about how Julian lacked the sophisticated refinement required to truly appreciate their high society traditions. What his family conveniently chose to ignore was the undeniable reality that Julian's successful corporate consulting business was the sole reason they could even afford such a lavish lifestyle. They happily consumed the premium vintage wines, ordered the most expensive catering packages, and stayed in luxury suites, all while treating the very man funding the entire weekend like an unwelcome outsider. As the planning for this year's grand milestone celebration began to intensify, Julian quietly decided that he had reached his absolute breaking point with their ungrateful behavior. He realized that as long as he kept enabling their entitlement by silently writing the checks and absorbing their insults, nothing about their toxic dynamic would ever change. When his siblings sent over a demanding list of high-end vendors and luxury upgrades for the upcoming weekend, Julian politely confirmed receipt without mentioning his new plan. Instead of booking the vineyard under his personal corporate account as he usually did, he merely put temporary holds on the reservations using a secondary card that required manual day of authorization. While his family spent weeks bragging to their elite social circles about the magnificent feast they were hosting, Julian quietly booked a solitary escape to a remote, tech-free mountain cabin hundreds of miles away. He envisioned a peaceful weekend surrounded by whispering pines and crisp mountain air, a stark and welcome contrast to the superficial drama that usually defined his summers. On the morning of the solstice gala, the rest of the family arrived at the breathtaking vineyard estate in their finest tailored attire, fully expecting Julian to already be there handling the logistics. They immediately began taking photos for social media and mingling with the early arrivals, completely oblivious to the fact that their usual financial safety net was nowhere near the property. Meanwhile, Julian was miles away, watching the sunrise over a serene mountain lake while sipping a hot cup of black coffee on his cabin's wooden deck. For the first time in his adult life, he felt a profound sense of lightness in his chest, knowing he was finally prioritizing his own mental well-being over the demands of people who did not respect him. Back at the vineyard, the atmosphere began to shift dramatically from celebratory to anxious as the afternoon rolled around and the venue coordinator requested the final payment clearance. Because Julian had intentionally left the primary corporate account unlinked, the estate's automated system flagged the reservation as unverified, instantly halting the preparations for the grand dinner. The head chef ordered his culinary team to stop plating the expensive Wagyu beef courses, while the sommelier locked away the rare reserve wines until a valid form of payment was physically presented. Chaos quietly began to brew behind the scenes as the staff realized that the wealthy family out front had absolutely no idea their luxury event was on the verge of being canceled. When his sister finally tried to track Julian down to demand why the champagne fountains weren't running yet, she discovered that his phone went straight to a customized vacation voicemail. Her irritation quickly turned into genuine panic when the venue manager walked out to the patio and politely informed the family that the entire event would be shut down in an hour if the six-figure bill wasn't settled immediately. His mother nearly fainted onto a velvet lounge chair, her composure disappearing in an instant as the reality of the situation began settling over everyone gathered inside the luxurious vineyard estate. Her eyes darted anxiously from one entrance to another, desperately expecting Julian to appear with his usual calm expression, quietly pull out his credit card, and resolve the humiliating financial disaster before anyone important noticed. That was the role he had silently played for years. Whenever plans became too expensive, whenever promises exceeded reality, or whenever the family stretched their finances beyond reason, Julian had always been the invisible solution. No questions were asked, no gratitude was expressed, and no acknowledgement was given. Everyone simply assumed he would arrive, pay whatever amount was necessary, and disappear back into the background, while others accepted the compliments for hosting another unforgettable celebration. This evening, however, every passing second made that expectation feel increasingly impossible. Guests continued arriving through the grand entrance, dressed in elegant gowns and tailored tuxedos, smiling as they admired the beautifully decorated venue overlooking the breathtaking coastline. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm golden light across polished marble floors, while servers carried silver trays filled with sparkling champagne. A live string quartet played soft melodies that floated gracefully through the reception hall, creating the perfect atmosphere of sophistication and wealth. On the surface, everything looked flawless. Beneath that polished appearance, however, panic was spreading faster than anyone could contain it. Julian's mother kept glancing toward the entrance every few moments, refusing to accept what her instincts were beginning to tell her. She whispered to herself that perhaps traffic had delayed him, or maybe he had stopped to answer an important business call. Surely he wouldn't simply abandon the family during the biggest social event of the summer. Surely he understood how much was depending on him. But 10 minutes became 20, 20 became 30. The empty doorway never changed. Across the room, Julian's brother quietly approached the event manager, forcing an uncomfortable smile while asking for just a little more time regarding the outstanding balance. The manager remained professional, nodding politely while explaining that several invoices remained unpaid and company policy required settlement before the evening could continue as planned. The conversation was calm, respectful, and completely devastating. His brother walked away trying to appear confident, but anyone watching closely could see the tension written across his face. He immediately began making phone calls, speaking in hushed tones while pacing near the gardens. His sister wasn't in much better condition. She repeatedly refreshed her banking applications, checked multiple credit cards, and searched through personal accounts, hoping she had forgotten about some hidden savings capable of covering the enormous expense. Every calculation ended with the same disappointing result. They simply didn't have enough. For years, none of them had needed substantial personal savings because Julian had quietly handled every financial emergency before it ever became visible. Expensive vacations, extravagant birthday parties, luxury venues, premium catering, and generous donations had all been supported by someone they rarely appreciated beyond his ability to write another check. Only now were they beginning to understand the true foundation beneath their comfortable lifestyle. It hadn't been wealth. It had been Julian. Family members started exchanging nervous looks instead of cheerful conversations. Their carefully rehearsed smiles slowly faded as uncertainty replaced confidence. Even relatives who knew nothing about the unpaid invoices sensed that something unusual was unfolding behind the scenes. Conversations became shorter. Laughter sounded forced. Every few minutes, someone would ask the same question. "Has anyone heard from Julian?" Each time, the answer remained painfully identical. No. That single word became heavier every time it was spoken. Eventually, it became impossible to ignore the obvious truth. Julian hadn't been delayed. He hadn't forgotten. He had made a deliberate decision not to come. That realization struck the family harder than any argument ever could. For the first time, they were experiencing what life looked like without the one person they had always assumed would rescue them, regardless of how poorly they treated him. Hundreds of miles away, surrounded by towering pine trees and peaceful mountain air, Julian rested comfortably inside a rustic cabin where a magnificent stone fireplace filled the room with gentle warmth. Outside, the shadows of the surrounding mountains slowly stretched across the valleys as the afternoon quietly faded toward evening. Birds called from distant branches, while a cool breeze carried the scent of fresh cedar through the slightly opened window. The complete silence surrounding him felt almost unfamiliar. No ringing phones, no endless family requests, no criticism disguised as advice, no pressure to fix problems that never belonged to him. Instead, he sat peacefully in a comfortable chair with an absorbing novel resting comfortably in his hands. Every chapter drew him deeper into another world, allowing him to experience something he had nearly forgotten existed. Peace, real peace. Occasionally, he glanced toward the window where sunlight filtered softly through the forest, creating beautiful patterns across the wooden floor. It was astonishing how calm life could feel when it wasn't dominated by constant emotional demands from people who only reached out whenever they needed something. Julian wasn't unaware of what was happening at the vineyard. In fact, he could picture the entire scene with remarkable accuracy. He imagined his mother insisting everything would somehow work out. He imagined his brother trying to negotiate impossible deadlines. He imagined his sister becoming increasingly frantic as every financial calculation failed. Most importantly, he understood one simple truth: none of it was his responsibility anymore. The crisis unfolding at the resort had not been created by his absence. It had been created by years of entitlement, unrealistic expectations, and the dangerous belief that one person would always sacrifice himself to protect everyone else from the consequences of their own decisions. For years, he had convinced himself that keeping the peace required endless compromise. Now he understood something entirely different. Sometimes protecting your own peace requires walking away. As the antique clock resting on the rustic nightstand slowly approached 6 o'clock, the warm glow from the fireplace became even more comforting. Julian placed another log onto the burning flames before preparing a fresh cup of tea. The familiar aroma filled the cabin while complete tranquility surrounded him. He smiled quietly, not because his family was struggling, but because, for the first time in years, their emergency wasn't automatically becoming his emergency.